Hey, folks, thanks for joining me for this episode of the Embellish Podcast, a podcast focused on product stories, product storytellers, interesting brand ambassadors, and anything else that we happen to come up with. Whether you're a bourbon fan, a geek, a casual observer, or someone just floating through the channel, I hope you find it interesting. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully, I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. And if you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com. I'll try to get that taken care of. I generally live stream the recording of these episodes on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at embellishpod or Twitter with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. Today, we are talking with John Waddell of Peerless and Stave and Bean and a host of other things, as well as Kentucky Colonel. So if I didn't steal too much from you, just kind of give us an idea who you are.
Yeah, so my name's John Waddell. I run the single barrel program there at Kentucky Peerless Distilling. So I always like to say I have one of the best jobs. Literally, I get to taste and help our master distiller grade barrels and decide which ones are the most unique, which ones get held back, go into batches. Then I get to meet people from all around the world that want to come in and buy their own private barrel. I also own a coffee company with a good friend of mine, Corey Welsh, called Stave and Bean, where we specialize in barrel aging coffee. Been going now. We just had our 1-year anniversary about 2 weeks ago, so I've been about a year into it. It's a lot of fun, man. You know, I couldn't ask for a better business partner either. He lives in New Orleans, so he gets to source all the beans, brings them up here, and then we'll choose unique barrels and unique beans based on flavor profiles, and we'll age them right there in the rick house down there at Kentucky Peerless. Corky, the owner, is so nice and has helped me along the way too, getting this business up and running. Then I also sit on the board of a nonprofit here called KOBBE, where basically, we try to raise money for the community while also getting to do awesome barrel picks and help pick barrels and bottles to help raise money.
So, there's about 57 different ways that we can go in this conversation, and my intent is to go all of them. But I'll say on the Stave and Bean thing, maybe I got the coffee way before I ever got to whiskey because I started drinking coffee when I was like 12 years old. But
I see your orders come through all the time, man.
Yeah. So I was in the first wave, and then I've got like 3 different coffee subscriptions. So usually if I can find a gap in my coffee subscription, I'm like, I need to sneak another bag in. I try to keep them in as fresh as possible, and they're fantastic. My brother is a huge coffee fan and not a whiskey fan. And so I usually send him some beans as well because he doesn't care about whiskey, but he does care about barrel aged beans, which is an odd thing, for somebody who's like, oh, I love the taste of this. I'm like, hey, let's drink whiskey. And he's like, nah, I don't want to do that. So it's fantastic stuff, but we may start on this single barrel curator. This is the job that was never at any career fair I ever went to. I don't know if it was at your career fair or whatever, because if it was, maybe my life would look different. But like, how do you get to that job?
I mean, honestly, I always tell people, right place, right time. It was just one of those crazy things where I met Caleb, our master distiller, through a mutual friend. Born and raised here in Kentucky, so always knew about whiskey and bourbon, loved it, bartended a little bit. But I was working with animals, right? I was like dead set, like I want to be a veterinarian. Like I want to work around some of these, larger breeds, and happened to run into Caleb. He saw something in me, I guess, and he offered me a job at Peerless before we ever had product out, and just kind of worked my way up through the ranks there. Started out just rolling barrels, giving tours. Then product became available, and I'll never forget this day. I go in the lab. We got so many samples, right? We're getting ready to launch this 2-year rye, and I just happened to ask Caleb, like, hey, can I taste one? He's like, yeah, give me your tasting notes on this. Tasted through a couple of them. He said, all right, I want you to come back tomorrow. We're going to do the same thing. And really just fell in love with it. I don't know if that's a silly thing to say, but there is nothing better than drilling samples, tasting these barrels for the first time, and kind of get to experience all of that. And I just kept on asking, like, hey, can I set up because he led the program at first. And then I was always just like on his coattails, like, hey, can I set up the room? I'll set up your room for you today for the selection. Can I help you taste barrels? And about a year into it, he had offered me the job to take over and to help run the barrel program. And if you could imagine, I think that was the quickest time I ever said yes to anything. Like before he could even finish the sentence, I was like, absolutely, I want to do this. So now I've been in it for like almost about 4 years running the program, and absolutely love it.
Yeah, I think going on a single barrel pick is like every like whiskey nerd's dream, and that's just what you do now. Like that's the job. But beyond that, so Peerless is a relatively small operation, with kind of a big name. I'll say that, at least in my opinion, and my opinion is the only one that matters in this room right now. So like in the room I'm in, not like in this chat room. It sounded like, oh yeah, my opinion matters more than John Waddles. So in the room that I'm physically sitting in, mine's the only one that matters. Uh, you guys do single barrels, you do small batches, you do a host of finishes. How do you get to, because like for the double oak, that's what I'm drinking right now. Is I have last year's double oak. I've been kind of milking this bottle forever because I live in the far western portion of the state, and we never know when we're going to get the next thing. Um, how do you guys do these types of blends? Is there a blending team? Are you the person? Is it, how does that work out?
So no, Caleb, Caleb's got a good, excellent palate. So it really is a group effort. We'll get these barrels down, and I always tell people, it's not just, we don't just dump a bunch of barrels and say, all right, this is what it's going to be. Caleb hand selects each and every barrel. We also have Nick. He's another distiller there. And what we'll kind of do is, we'll dump a couple barrels, usually about 4, let it sit, and kind of build the batch from there. We're very selective on the barrels that we put into these, because you got to think we're not mass dumping, 400 or 500 barrels. We're only putting about 25 to 30 barrels in each and every batch. So every barrel has a very particular role they're going to play in the batches. So it's a little tedious and time consuming, because it's not just something we do in a day. It takes about, a week or two process to build these batches. But we'll taste and hand select each and every barrel that goes into these. And what I love about our double oak, and the motto kind of Caleb has in the philosophy, is, we don't have necessarily a set flavor profile. Like if you taste this year's double oak small batch that just came out last Saturday, compared to last year, they're going to be different, similar in some ways, but there are going to be some difference about them.
It was one of my most anticipated and liked releases of last year, but kind of rolling back into the single barrel curation just a little bit. How do you pick the barrels that are part of? Because I assume it's not just every barrel in the rick house that you're picking from. You may have 20 or 30 or 10 or 5 or whatever the number is. Like, how do you get to those?
So, we only do 100 barrel selections a year. So very small. We only make 10 to 12 barrels a day, roughly like 2,200 barrels a year. So, say we taste 20 barrels, right? There may only be like 1 or 2 barrels that get selected into the program out of those 20, to give you an idea of like what the turnaround rate is on some of these. What's the word I'm looking for? It's very selective. We'll take these barrels and we base them on uniqueness. You got to think most of the barrels that go into the program are going to be very off profile, right? If you've had our small batch, we like to put the crazy, unique barrels that we can find. I always tell them they're like our Easter egg barrels. Some will be like strictly butterscotch. One, I just did a selection last week with the Bourbon Hounds of Houston, right? And we had this one. I know it's going to sound crazy, but it was almost like a little bit of like, it had like an AutoZone smell to it, if you can imagine what AutoZone, but it was just so unique and different. So, we're looking for, just the most unique barrels that we can, in order to put into these programs that we have.
I like that. And, because I think, at least from my experience, I've only been on one barrel pick, and the barrel that I wanted was the first one eliminated because it was the one that was the most off profile. And that's the direction like I kind of go. I'm like, I want something that's really unique. And then, other people want maybe the truest version of what, a Peerless bottle normally is. Like you get the small batch, but they find that in the most refined version of it. And that's not I want something that's weird, like I want the weird thing that everybody's like, why is this different? And that's sort of why I fell for this Peerless double oak. At least for me, it ended up tasting like, have you ever had Mexican hot chocolate where it's got like cinnamon and cream and all that, but there's the chocolate that's in there? Like that's immediately, I've had a lot of double oak products, but I've never gotten sort of that there, and it's a brand, and I can't think of the name of it, but Nestle makes it in Mexico. my wife teaches ELL students, so we spend a lot of time thinking about Mexican food or whatever. But so I imagine these single barrel picks are not always like super fun experiences. Do you have people that come in that just have like a expectation that doesn't get met, or like how do you manage that?
Luckily, no. I mean, I like to say I like to go above and beyond. Like, say, we only put 3 samples out in front of people when they come in, just because when you start to add too many, it becomes very hard to make a choice. But I've had groups that come in and say, I'm not really impressed, or these barrels aren't what I'm looking for. I'll go pull more. I'm not going to be happy unless they're happy leaving them. I've even told groups like, hey, if you're unsure about this barrel selection, let me get some more samples out for you. Just because. And what I like about when we're doing this is there's 3 of us that taste these barrels, right? It's not just on one person, and we all 3 have very different flavor profiles that we like. So I always like to tell people, I promise you, I will find something you like within the program. And, it's about getting them to come back to want to purchase another barrel. So I always make sure they leave happy. And once again, our acceptance rate into the program is, like I said, we'll taste 20 barrels. We may only select 2 out of there. And we even have a grading system. If I put a barrel that's been in 4 or 5 selection and no one's really picked it, we'll put it out, put it into a batch, and we'll grade some more barrels and find something else into there. So, I always like to tell people, I'm not always, just because they're in my program or our program, doesn't mean that everyone's going to enjoy them, and I think you just got to not get your feelings hurt or be so sensitive when people come in and say, yeah, I don't like this barrel or whatnot, because sometimes you need that outside input to be like, all right, is this barrel really that great, or do I just find it that interesting?
Right. Well, I mean, and taste is subjective, and you're tasting a lot of whiskey, and some people just don't like a particular flavor profile, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But you're looking at a 10% or less acceptance rate of barrels kind of coming into the program to begin with, and you're only, I think you said 100 different single barrels are going out roughly a year. That's I assume you guys have a line that is longer than the 100 people that want to do that. How do you select?
Oh man, it's rough. Because of the 3-tier system, unfortunately we can't meet everyone's needs. A lot of this we rely on our distributors, especially when it comes to some of these, off-premise accounts or on-premise accounts. We rely on them heavily to go in there, see what kind of business they're doing with us as a whole. Make sure they support our small batch, not just our single barrels too as well. But we do like to leave open spots to bring in new people every year as well. So, man, it's tough. Basically, we take all the info, get it on a waiting list, and we just kind of mark down to see who reached out first, how much support do they give us and things like that. I would say the hardest part, though, about the single barrel program is not really the accounts. It's falling in love with some of these barrels. Like when you taste some, like I know where those barrels are. I'm like, God, that's such a good barrel. And it's hard because you want to put it in the selection because you want people to select it. But you're like, I kind of like having it here and pulling a sample every now and then and sipping on this barrel. And that's one of the biggest things. But, it really is hard because I like to say yes to everybody. And I get in trouble a lot. I'm like, yeah, you can have a barrel. You can have a barrel. I'm like, hold on. You can't promise a barrel to everyone. But, hopefully we'll kind of gradually as we get more product, because you got to think we got to make sure we save enough back each year as well to have older age statements. So selecting these groups, it's tough, but I think we do a good job at circulating new people into the program and not just the same people selecting barrels every year.
So you get in trouble for being the Oprah of barrels. Everybody gets one.
Pretty much.
Do you try to keep back a bottle from every barrel that you send out so you can have like a library of everything you've done, or is that just way too much over? Because that'd be 100 bottles a year, and you've been doing it for 2 or 3 years. It's like it's a job any of us are willing to store for you. Like if you wanted to do that, we'll store the barrels or bottles on your behalf.
There's a couple that I'm like, I'll even ask like the account, like, hey man, can I have a bottle out of here? I'll purchase it from you, and they're always more than happy to. But the great thing is when you bottle these, you got to blow out your lines right afterwards. We call them squeezing. So I at least get like a 200 ml of it with a sticker on there just to make sure. But heck, I wish I could say I've kept a bunch of them, but I drank them. I mean, I drank literally
But,
anything and everything I have. So that's the main problem is I'm like, God, I wish I still had a bottle of that.
well, I mean, that's what the purpose of it is. You know, like, some of us getting to the point where our purchasing outpaces our consumption because it would not be healthy for me to drink at the rate that I buy. But if you're starting with 200 mLs, maybe that makes life more simple. You know, because maybe you can burn through those. But what is your process whenever you go in tasting? Like you have everybody's kind of got their own thing, and once they've done a tasting 2 or 3 times, like what does your process look like?
You like me personally, or just like as like Peerless the program?
Yeah, we'll do you first, and then we'll do Peerless second.
So I mean, it is a ritual. In the morning, I try to make sure I brush my teeth at least like first thing in the morning. So I know once I get into work, usually it's only about 30-40 minutes. We dive into taste. I make sure I don't drink coffee, anything spicy or anything like that too. But I I like to put on some classical music. They built us uh, I got a brand new office down there that we do all our sensory training and tastings and things like that in. I like
Mhm.
throwing a little music. Caleb and Nick will come in there. We'll kind of sit down, and while it is business, you got to have fun with it. So it's all about enjoying the people that you're around too as well. And other than that, I really don't have a process. I just like I said, I just try and make sure my palate's good.
Mhm.
No medicine, no allergy meds. You got to be careful about what you take too as well because that will affect your palate. I mean, there's
Mhm.
days where Caleb will come in and be like, "Hey, my palate's way off. I had this and this to eat this morning or last night, or I'm on allergy meds or cold meds." So,
Mhm.
but I will say my palate's the best early in the morning. I think everyone has a certain time of day as well that they really enjoy tasting over, the morning versus afternoon. But I feel like my palate's just the freshest in the morning, so I like to knock it out first thing in the morning when we get there.
Mhm. And so then somebody shows up and they want to do a tasting. So how do you run these events? You've got 3 samples. You've got a group of people. What's the instruction for the new to the single barrel selection person?
So, when they come in, I always like to tell them, like, hey, I don't do proofs. I don't put age statements. I don't put proofs on these. I don't even provide tasting notes because it's not about what I see
Mhm.
or what I taste. I always tell the groups, like, hey, this is your show. I'm here just to answer questions. Now, I always tell them, like, however you like to taste them, it's your all's process. I don't want to tell you all how to come in here and how we're going to taste through the barrels. So, what I typically do is I have a glass of our small batch out. That way they can kind of get a generalization of, what our small batch is. And then it really lets you look through these samples to see how unique they are, whether they're trying to go for something completely off flavor profile or something geared more towards a small batch. And I always just tell them, take your time because I don't pull those samples till the day of. I've already, the day before I go through, I'll taste samples. And the objective is to find 3 samples that are very different from each other. I don't like putting anything close together that may resemble one another. So I always tell them, no, take your time. I know you're excited to be here, but give them about 5 or 10 minutes to sit in this glass. That's why I always give them the small
Mhm.
batch too, so they can kind of warm up their palate, sip on that. Start off some conversations, just kind of get an idea of who they are, if they're new, or just catching up with them. I always try to tell people, it's about the people you come in there and enjoying the company that you had too as well. And I like to build friendships with them and just kind of shoot the shit, and then
Mhm.
we'll dive in after about 5 or 10 minutes once they've opened up. Then we'll go through nose and taste everything, and just kind of get a feel for what they like and what they don't like.
Yeah, and I like that, because whiskey's a communal beverage. And at least most brown spirits to me are, there's an intent to have an experience with people. It's not like going to a bar and ordering, a severely mixed drink that has clear alcohol in it. You've got kind of a destination in mind, whether it's, you're going to go to the dance floor, you're going to try to get drunk, like whatever your plan is varies. But most of the times, whiskey is, I want to spend some time around some people. Now I'm going to have fun. I'm going to do the other things. And kind of building that community environment while they're tasting through it maybe settles them into how they're going to drink it when they get home too. Right. And so it kind of completes that experience, or at least it would feel like that way to me.
Exactly, and I'm glad you said it because when we're tasting through these barrels, a lot of the time people will say like, all right, this barrel I can sit at home and drink 4 or 5 glasses of this with a cigar, or
Mhm.
they may like the barrel like, hey, this is the one I pull out special for when someone comes over and they just want to taste something really
Yeah.
unique and different, but it's not going to be your everyday drinker that you have.
Yeah. So you've got these 2 barrels out of 20 roughly that you're picking on a regular basis. Do you go back to the other 18 and kind of keep up with their progress and maybe they eventually make it in? Or is it like we did these 20, these 18 are going for small batch blends and these 2 are it?
Oh no, we have a whole section we call X with Promise, right? So we've
Mm-hmm.
tasted it. Maybe the finish is lacking, or the nose, needs a little bit of work on the aromatics, and we'll put it back. We track what Rick they're in. We may move them around a little bit, and we won't revisit them probably to about a year later, or maybe once it goes through another heat cycle or anything. When I say heat cycle, we don't temperature control anything. I just mean as like as Kentucky, you just let Mother Nature do her thing here. So yeah, we have a whole process. Just because they don't make it in the program, we do have like what we like to call, we just keep our eye out on this barrel. Like, hey, it's going to turn and it's going to be fantastic when it does.
Mm-hmm. So, do you guys ever come across a barrel that's just absolutely irredeemable? Like this is just no good anymore. Like, what do you do with that?
We'll let it keep aging. We have a lot of faith. I always hate when people say like, "Oh, we don't make bad barrels here." Every distillery is gonna have barrels that just, for some reason, whatever or not, they just don't turn around, or the flavor just isn't good. But we'll keep an eye on them. Sometimes we may double oak them just to see if maybe like, hey, let's see if we can put this in another barrel, see if it helps turn. But we have quite a bit that we're still just waiting on and hoping maybe they'll get better as they get older. But we try not to put, even if we don't like a barrel, we don't want to put it into our small batch, right? Because that's still going to affect the flavor because we don't use that many barrels. So really, we just try to keep a close eye on it, move them around a little bit. Maybe put it up a little bit higher in the ricks because we only use single story rick housing. We don't do multi levels. We go about 5 or 6 higher in our ricks. So it's just about being patient. You can't rush it. So as Corky likes to say, patience builds character, and that's what we believe in our whiskey too. There,
Patience is a terrible thing.
yeah.
But and I like that. You said anybody who says they don't make bad whiskey is probably not telling the truth. I think about I make grilled cheese for my kids all the time, but I can sit down and I can make 100 grilled cheese, and I guarantee you at least 3 of them are going to be burnt terribly, and I'm going to do the exact same thing I've done for the other 97. It just happens that way, right?
Yeah.
That's variables kind of come into play, but not everybody that comes through the door is going to be able to have the single barrel experience at Peerless, right? Because they're just a visitor, tourist, whatever. I've been to Louisville probably 6 times in the last year or so, and none of them have been for a Peerless single barrel pick. What do I do if I come in otherwise? Like I am a non-single barrel picker. What's the experience like at Peerless for me?
We do tours and tastings, and like I said, the great thing about Peerless is we're located right in the heart of downtown Louisville, right off 10th and Main, and we're in an old tobacco warehouse. And we do everything on site. So we cook there, distill there, bottle there. We have a rick house there on site. So when you come in and you do a tour, you see the whole operation, our grain mill, everything there. We also have tastings scheduled. We just finished the construction of a new tasting room as well because we were turning so many people away because our tours and tastings were booked. Corky and them really wanted to try to take care of everyone. So we just built a brand new tasting room. So you can we do tastings in there every 30 minutes. You can't schedule them. They're just there for our walk-ins that come in. Maybe the tours were booked, but they still want to come in. So we have a brand new tasting room in honor of Corky's father. It's called the Ace Taylor Tasting Room. That you can come in and taste anything that we have to offer there too as well. Or you can just come in the gift shop, look around, and hang out with Rye, our distillery cat, up there in the gift shop.
And I it's one of those things I had read a number of times that you guys are in an old tobacco warehouse, but it just doesn't ever completely register. The company that I work for, we had it's an agricultural software company, and we were actually operating out of our old tobacco barns, and then they moved us into a new high-tech office in a tobacco warehouse. So I'm familiar with the environment, but ours is obviously very, very different. So in the tastings, you have access to everything that is available. I know you guys have done some finishes in the past. What's the finish game like at Peerless?
Man, I like it because we're doing things. Our first ever finish that we had done, no one had done one that I'd seen. It was an absinthe finish that we did. And I always tell people it is a love or hate. You either got to like black licorice, like there is no in between on this one, but it went fantastic. We couldn't keep it in. We did one barrel pick with it up in Chicago with Benny's. They loved it up there. And it's such a unique finished barrel. We did rye. We put rye in these absinthe barrels from Copper and Kings, and it was just fantastic. Then this year we had our rum finish release come out that we did. Very different, if you're used to like Angel's Envy, their rye, we did bourbon in our rum finish, and it's just so unique. It's dark fruit, sweet on the nose. The palate really comes across great. It's got a little bit of a dry finish to it, but I enjoy that in it on the rum finish that we have. We're doing another absinthe release this year. Coming up in October, we'll have some more coming out. So, Caleb and them, they're just trying to do things different. They're trying to do things that no one else is doing. So it's a lot of fun. I really do enjoy experimenting with these finishes that we're creating.
And the absinthe finish, I did not get a bottle of it, but I got to try it, and I didn't get a bottle specifically because I don't like absinthe to begin with. Like, it's not, black licorice is not a flavor for me, but I can objectively look at it and say, okay, for what it is after, this is good, right? I don't like it, but I understand the flavor profile of absinthe. I understand the flavor profile of rye, how these merge together. For a person who liked absinthe and or rye, this is a thing that they could absolutely be on board with. It's just, it wasn't for, me specifically. And on the rum finish, that was one that like I wanted to make the trip to pick up because I enjoy super dry things. Like if you can just kind of suck all the moisture out of my mouth, that's a thing that I'm interested in, which is sort of weird. Like that's a weird thing to say. I acknowledge that.
You're not the first one to say that, though. I mean, people come in there all the time like, oh, man, I love the dry finish on this. Because you're still obtaining the flavor on your palate. It's just drying out your palate a little bit. And it does leave like, because we don't chill filter or charcoal filter, we keep all those delicious oils. So it has a nice coating mouthfeel. But, yeah, it has a little bit of a dry finish, which I really enjoy, too, in it.
So pivoting, I guess, a little bit, you do some, and I say it's pivoting a little bit, you do some volunteer work / board work with KOBBE. So what is KOBBE for the, I'm aware of it, but kind of what is KOBBE?
It stands for Kentucky's Original Black Bourbon Enthusiasts. It's just a group of people. We have about 65 members now, 63 members. And it's just a great way to enjoy your bourbon. We always, our motto is you come for the bourbon, but you stay for the community. It's just a good group of people that get together. We like raising money. We work a lot with Apron to help raise money for whether it's just school supplies, people in need, just anything and everything. We try not to concentrate on just one area. And we do barrel picks. I run our program there. I sit on the board and help organize barrel picks throughout the year. We have a big event in December called Bourbon and Benevolence, where we do live auction items, silent auction as well. And, what I always say, what I love about KOBBE the most is, we're all on Discord together in a big group chat. And it's just a way, if you like getting out and about and you want to have a drink with someone or share a bottle, you can always find a KOBBE member to go hang out with at all different types of establishments around the city. So just a good group of people, that like to get together, share a couple pours, and also help out in the community as well.
So Bourbon and Benevolence, that's you touched on it. It's there's some auction, but are there other things that kind of go along with Bourbon and Benevolence?
Like as far as other events that we do and things like that. Oh yeah, it changes every year. Bourbon and Benevolence is like the only thing that we do every single year for sure in December. But other than that, we do all different types of fundraisers throughout the year. It just depends on, we always look for new members to say, hey, if you have any suggestions or you want to do something, bring it to the group and we'll try to organize something to put it together, whether it's a poker game, to help raise money, or we'll do raffles, just raffle off bottles during the year too to help raise money. So it's anything and everything you can possibly think of.
So if a person were wanting to be a part of KOBBE, KOBBE, however it's going to be pronounced, if you want to be a part of the organization, what is that? What is the process to say, I want to participate, I want to donate, I want to, whatever.
We have a website. You just go right on the website, just www.kobbe.com, KOBBE. And you can just apply there for a membership. And what we do is, we try to look together as a board. So, it's a whole questionnaire. Tell us a little bit about yourself, why you want to join. And we always tell people, if you're joining the group just to get bottles, you're going to be very disappointed, because that's just not what we do there. Obviously, whiskey's a good part of it. But once again, it's just more about getting more involved in the community, hanging out with a bunch of people, and, just like I said, I can't say enough, just trying to raise money for people in need.
Yeah, and I think it's a possibility that somebody showing up just to get bottles can transition into something a little bit more valuable as far as like relationships and relationship building. Because I think about being on the far western end of the state, there's very few organizations, and so I see these things pop up. I'm like, I should send some money that way. I waste money on far worse things on a regular basis. I should send some good somewhere. But like you said, you're in Discord. If you want to go out and have a drink, you can get a hold of somebody and go out and do that. But there's not really an option on the western end of the state. Like, hey, you guys want to come to Murray? You can sit down and have a drink in the middle of nowhere. Not exactly the same behavior, but every year, whenever it rolls around to the auction, to the things that are kind of transpiring with the group, I know I'm always kind of keeping an eye open and interested to see the kind of what comes out of those things. How did you get drawn into this organization?
Once again, right place, right time. There's an establishment here in Louisville that I absolutely love. It's one of the best restaurants here in town. It's called Bourbon Bistro. Jason Bronner, who's the owner, and he also owns Buzzard Roost Whiskey. If you haven't heard of that, fantastic stuff they're doing. And I used to go up there all the time, just after work, stop by, have a drink, hang out. And Stefan, he's like our liaison. Was sitting at the bar. He's like, hey, what's going on? I see you up here. I'm like, oh, I'm with Kentucky Peerless. I'm John Wadle. And he just said, have you ever heard of KOBBE? He said, Jamar, he's sitting right down at the bar. He's our president. You want to come down and hang out with us? I mean, literally invited me to come down there and sit. And Jamar was like, hey, why don't you start coming to some of our meetings? And this is how blind I was to it. I was like, yeah, I thought they were just inviting me because I was worked in the industry.
Right.
So I was like, yeah, I went to 2 of their meetings, and at one point I said, how do I get into here? And he goes, what do you think I've been inviting you here for? He's like, you kept walking off when we talked about club business. And I was like, well, I didn't think I was supposed to be, part of that or hear that. And he was like, started laughing. He's like, no. He's like, we want you in here. So I've been in there now for about 2 years. And like I said, just right place, right time, happened to run into them. And when you click with people, you just click, And it just made sense. I wanted to get more involved in the industry and something with a purpose too, not just, we pick, 20 barrels a year. It was just, hey, we like to have a good time, raise money, and just hang out.
All right. So we've talked a little bit about KOBBE. We've talked about Peerless. Let's talk about some coffee. Coffee was maybe my first thing that I ever got beyond normal obsessed with, because I was drinking coffee obviously before I was drinking whiskey. How did you begin your journey with coffee? Mine began in my grandparents' house. They had coffee around at all times. Listen, I'm just waiting for my dog to bark.
I've been sitting here waiting for it. I was like, oh, she's being so good. But it was bound to happen.
Yeah, it's gonna happen sooner or later. But you had a beginning with coffee. Where did that happen?
So, hey, sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
She is a little spitfire. So the pandemic happened. We shut down for tours. Hey, quit. Sorry, man. We shut down for tours. Production was still going on. So, I had a little bit of free time. And it's, I saw a lot of my friends lose their job or stuff like that, couldn't find work, had to go on unemployment. And not that I ever had to worry about that, but I also thought to myself, man, I'm really lucky that I still have a job. But what would I do if I wasn't here at Peer? What could I possibly do? Always loved coffee, and I saw 2 different companies that were doing barrel-aged coffee. You had Cooper's Cask and you had Oak and Bond. Neither one of them are located in Kentucky, right? One's up in Maine and one's South Carolina that we have. Hey, and I was like, why is the number 1 barrel-aged coffee not in Kentucky? It just didn't make sense to be the number 1 whiskey not being or number 1 bourbon not being in Kentucky, a little bit in my opinion. Hey, Sue, quit it. So I started experimenting. I was like, all right, I can do this. Like, I taste barrels, and that's like a lot of time these barrels, when we dump them, they just go back to a cooperage, right? So I was like, how can I recapture some of these aromatics and some of these flavors from these barrels? So I literally started with like a plastic tub.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on one second, man.
No, you're good. You're good, man.
Let me.
This is the life we all live. I have pets as well. It's I've been waiting for them to just go nuts.
Yeah. At least I don't have any kids, but I got 2 dogs that are just absolutely amazing. But yeah, so I literally started by using some barrel char, and I put it a little bit in a plastic tub, and I put some coffee beans, some green beans in there. And I was like, all right, let's see how this works. I kept it in there for, I don't know, like 3 or 4 weeks. I was using just a small roaster in town to roast them for me, and just to see if we had anything. And I'll never forget, he's like, man, he's like, this is good coffee. He's like, what bean is this? I was like, oh, it's just it's an Honduran bean I bought. I put it in a rye barrel. I put it in a tub with some char from one of these rye barrels that we dumped. And he's like, well, let's roast it. He's like, do you have any of it before it went into the barrel? And I was like, yeah. It's like, sure do. So we roasted it before barrel aging and after, and there was a huge difference within the coffee bean that we had there.
Mm-hmm.
So Corey Welsh, he runs, he sits on the board of the New Orleans Bourbon Festival that we have, and down New Orleans. And I'm so sorry, man. My dogs are going freaking nuts right now.
No, it's fine. No worries, man.
So he had come into the distillery. He was in town. We were still closed, and he was like, "What are you doing? What are you up to these days?" And I was like, "Man, check out this barrel aged coffee that I'm doing." I was like, "I'm experimenting with this." And my idea was just to have 2 coffees, bourbon and rye. I was like, I have access to all these barrels. Hey, quit. And he immediately, like within 10 minutes of me explaining to him, showing the coffee, he's like, I want in. He's like, I live in New Orleans. He's an engineer for Shell, so he has a full-time job outside of this. He's like, we can literally get any coffee beans we want to from these coffee ports down here.
Yep.
So he came along, invested some money into it. He really saw something, and he really kind of helped make my dream a little bit of a reality too. So we went from having just bourbon and rye to sourcing rum barrels, orange curacao barrels, cognac, cherry bitters, peach bitters. And when we launched, we had about 10 different styles of barrel-aged coffee that we did, which some people are like, you're crazy. You got 10 different products. But we wanted to show people that we were more than just, bourbon barrel-aged coffee. We wanted to take some really unique beans and find some really unique barrels. And one of my favorite ones that we did was the vanilla extract barrel that we had. If you've never smelled like pure vanilla extract, it smells absolutely amazing. So once we got the ball rolling on that, it was kind of sky's the limit for us. So we use Quills. It's a local roastery here in Louisville. They make fantastic coffee. So they actually roast everything for us. Then what I love about this too is, your friends. We had another friend, Jessica Ann, who we were brokering barrels through, getting some of the barrels. She had the bright idea to start mingling some of these barrels, which we have a whole cocktail series that we do. We have one called the Sidecar, and it's where we took a Costa Rican bean, put it in an orange curacao barrel, and then we blend that with an El Salvadorian that we do in bourbon barrels. And, that's 2 key ingredients in what you like to call a bourbon sidecar. Then we have a Manhattan, a Mai Tai, an Old Fashioned. So thank goodness for her, because she really, her creative mind really helped us kind of, take it to another level, because no one was doing anything like that as well. Like I said, you just had Cooper's Cast and Oak and Bond that were kind of doing barrel-aged coffee. And we really, my main goal was I want the #1 barrel-aged coffee to be in Kentucky. And it was just, it was a lot of fun too. Really enjoyed the journey. We now own about 7 different Krogers. Thanks to Chris over there at Kroger's that heads like their spirits department. We have an online website. We're in a couple restaurants too around town as well. So it's been really exciting, because this got way bigger than I ever thought it was going to be. I was just trying to make some money on the side, have a little coffee business. But now, it's really taken off.
And you answered a question that I didn't even have, but I actually did have. Like it's a thing that I thought about in the past, but forgot to write it down. Is like how did you get to the cocktail blends? Because I was like, surely they didn't make 50 gallons worth of a cocktail and throw it in a barrel to barrel age and then put beans in it, because that would be borderline insane. But that's really really smart, and thinking to be able to take these different components, kind of blend it together to make it. I like that. And they're fantastic blends for sure. I mean, like the thing that I always had as a problem with barrel aged coffees in the past is that they very much smelled like barrel aged, but I didn't get a ton of it on the flavor profile, right? Like it was almost like it was sprayed down with rye on its way out the door. And then it didn't carry any of the rye flavor with it. And you guys are distinctly different from that, at least in my interpretation. We did an experiment here locally. My brother, like I said, he's super, super into coffee. He roasts his own beans and does a bunch of different stuff. And, he wanted to do his own barrel age. And so I took my dad to go pick up his maker's bottle. He's in the Maker's Mark club where you kind of get to go and dip your own bottle or whatever. While we were there, they were selling the 46 cask staves. And so it's like, all right, we'll get some staves. We'll make a box. You can put your beans in it and see what happens. And, the first 3 versions of it were terrible, just absolutely terrible, because they're dried out. And so finally I was like, all right, here, I'm going to give you some whiskey. Maker's 46. You spray down the staves so they actually have some whiskey to it and let them kind of, feel it out. And it ended up turning out really, really good. But going the route of barrel char to begin with seems pretty smart. Seems pretty smart. And if anybody goes to your Instagram, they can see you guys kind of emptying out the barrels from the aging of the beans itself. Go ahead.
No, just say, the key to it is the freshness of the barrels. You can't use the dried out barrel. So like I said, we'll dump some of these barrels that go up to our gift shop, and I'll literally look at Caleb and be like, I need that barrel. Like the whiskey's fantastic. It smells amazing. Mm-hmm. Like I want to use this barrel. And that's really like what I like to say I take pride in is hand selecting each and every barrel that we use. And there's nothing better than still having some of that beautiful alcohol in there when you put the beans in there. Because once again, we put them in green. We do not roast them first before we put them in the barrel. We'll put them in green, let them sit anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks. And they don't just sit on a coffee floor. They go up in a rick and age with other whiskey and bourbon, and sit there until we'll pull them out as time goes on and roast them and figure out if they're ready or not.
So what was it? I mean, I know what the outcome of the initial launch was, because I was trying to make sure I was one of the first people on the website buying beans whenever it came available. Did the initial demand meet your expectation or exceed? Like, did you know that it was going to be that popular from the onset?
I didn't know what to expect. The one thing I love about the bourbon community is they're all so supportive. So, we've been like hyping up saying, hey, this is when it launches. And shout out to Haley Cruth. She runs Moxie Made. She helps small businesses launch. So we had a little hiccup in our website, and it was like 2 weeks before we were supposed to launch, and we didn't have an active website. And she used to work at Peerless, run our marketing. So I reached out to her, and she was like, no problem. Don't worry. I'll have this up and running from you. And I'll never forget, like, my anxiety the day we launched, because I still had to go to work, right? And I run all our shipping too. And I'm just watching these orders pile in. And it was a good thing. I was excited. I'm like, oh, my God, I'm going to have to ship out 80 orders when I get off work today and start packaging these things. So, it was so good to see. But at the same time, I'm, like, panicking, like, oh, my God, I'm going to have to ship out all this coffee as well. So it was, it was so good to see. And what I love about it is seeing the names that come across these orders, too. Like, people that maybe I'll even met like once or twice, getting right on there and purchasing. It wasn't just like 1 or 2 bags, it was like 3 or 4 bags they were getting and ordering. And it was just, man, it was one of the best feelings in the world to see the support from the whiskey family.
Yeah, I know and it seems to be a lot of overlap between like whiskey nerds and coffee nerds and cigar nerds. They're like all the same people. Like they all like the same things. I don't know. Maybe we've got the same degree of just need for drugs in our soul, I guess is what it really boils down to.
Well, I gave Corky, our owner, 5% of the coffee company because, he had helped me out and he didn't want it, but I was like, you're going to take it. I was like, you're letting me use the distillery equipment and everything. And then what's amazing is when I do these barrel selections with the groups, after the selection, they select their barrel. I'm like, all right, now when we dump this barrel, because most people are coffee people. I'm like, you want your own barrel aged coffee? And they're like, absolutely. So right now I have a 3-way collaboration going on with the Adventures Club. They're up in Chicago. They had selected a barrel of rye. We dumped that barrel, and then I introduced them to the Single Barrel Cigar Company out of Tampa. Love these guys, the Tampa Bay Bourbon Boys. And they're now, I have a barrel with about 800 cigars aging in it. And then after the cigars are done aging, then we're going to put coffee in there. So the first time we've done a tobacco coffee or tobacco barrel aged coffee. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. I'm really excited to get that one going.
So when are these cigars going to be ready?
They're coming up in October. The Tampa Bay Bourbon guys and the Single Barrel Cigar Company, they're coming up October. We're going to break open the barrel and package all these cigars, about 800 of them. That you can find. They got a website. They're down in Tampa. Great group of guys, and their cigars are fantastic.
Yeah, I've come across them a number of times because I don't have a passion for cigars. I like cigars. I have a passion for whiskey. I have a passion for coffee, but I like cigars. But this is a thing that I'm incredibly interested in. Is there an intent to ever take one of your coffee barrels and then pass it back to Peerless to put whiskey in, or is that even is that FDA compliant
Caleb,
or whatever?
I've asked Caleb if he'd be interested, and we'll see. Hopefully, I think if we did that, I would actually probably roast the coffee first, then put it in the barrel to really capture more of the essence of the roasted coffee and not like the green beans. But we've had some talks about it. I just got to convince them, like, hey, man, this is going to be fantastic. Like, no one's done this before. Like, we should definitely do this.
And I came across this some time ago. There's a particular way of aging tobacco inside of barrels, effectively whiskey barrels that haven't been uncharred, where you can kind of put wet tobacco in it. You let it sort of ferment and do its own thing. And like this is a thing, maybe like, somebody needs to do some wet fermentation. Happens a lot in Louisiana. Wet ferment tobacco, then put coffee beans in it. Then we put whiskey in it. Now I have my cigar and my coffee and my cigar and my whiskey and my coffee and my whiskey. And I can have all three of these things interchangeably, regardless of what time of the day it is.
See, I like the way your mind's turning right now. You're just already, you're like me, just thinking of different ways and stuff to do.
This is the problem. This is the problem. But so what's the best way to brew your coffee? Are we putting it through just a regular drip coffee? Or we pour over like French press?
Man,
What's your thing?
I hate to admit it, but I've turned into like such a coffee snob. Like I went from using like Keurigs now to I used to be really big in like the Chemexes, but there is nothing better than a nice French press in the morning. I can get it going, take a shower, come out, stomp it down, pour it in, I'm out the door. But like this morning, I have a espresso machine, a Bourbon, and there is nothing better than a good espresso with a little bit of steamed milk in it to start your day off, or just as I'm tinkering here, setting my football lineup for the day. So I would say French press or just espresso. Now, my business partner, Corey, he's more of a purist. He's black only, where I like a little bit of cream in my coffee because I think it plays well with some of the barrel aged too coffee that we have. So yeah, man, it's a whole different experience. I'll even take my French press with me if I travel. Like I'm like, all right, I gotta have a French press, a little hand grinder. It makes a difference.
Now, if you get to where you can't take the French press because it's glass or whatever, you can try an AeroPress, which is a different thing altogether, but gives you a little bit of a mix of like French press and espresso because you're using some degree of pressure on it. That's a thing that a West Coast rapper that I interviewed a couple months ago, like that was his thing about 10 years ago. He was really into these AeroPresses. You just kind of sit on top of a coffee cup. But yeah, no, I'm with you on the French press thing. When I have the time, because I have 2 kids, and so I got to get up in the morning, make sure everything's going. And so it's, I try to buy a nice drip machine so it's not like burning the beans, it's not doing all these things. But Saturday morning is French press day. It's absolutely French press day.
And what I love about coffee, like you said, you can nerd out about coffee just as much as whiskey because, depending on your grind size, your temperature that you're bringing your water to, it's all going to extract different flavors. You can over extract, under extract your coffee. I remember the first cupping session I ever did, where you break the crust away, you're smelling it, you're sipping it, and you feel so weird. I remember the first cupping session you did because you're supposed to slurp, right? And I
Yep.
just felt so pretentious. I'm like, are you sure this? And Nate and Brian at Quill's like, oh man, no, this is how you do it. And we're all just making these slurping noises, enjoying coffee, which also I think has really helped my palate too as well when it comes to the whiskey side of things.
Yeah.
Is doing these cupping sessions there with them.
Yeah, do any kind of taste. If it's wine, if it's whiskey, if it's rum, if it's if it's coffee, all of these tastings feel pretentious as hell, but there's like science behind it, and so it's a real thing. So we've talked a little bit about cigars, and I think you enjoy cigars, right? So
I do.
what do you have a utility cigar that kind of crosses the threshold of coffee and whiskey and just day-to-day life, or do you have like unique pairings that match each one?
Not really. Like I said, I love cigars. I got a humidor filled of cigars, but for me, I'm not too big or I'm not too worried about does it pair well, does not pair well. But I will say one of my favorite absolute pairings is our double oak small batch. I was at Davidoff in Tampa, Florida, and Tommy there gave me this Tiger Stripe. It was like a $45 cigar, most expensive cigar I've ever had. Gave me this Tiger Stripe cigar, Monte Cristo, and I still think about that pairing. Like, I'll never reach that satisfaction probably again. So that's been like one of my favorite pairings. So usually, like I said, if I'm going to go with coffee, I'm doing like a light to medium body cigar. If I'm doing whiskey, I like something a little bit heavier, a little bit darker too when I'm pairing it with the whiskey. But coffee, there's nothing better than French press with like just a little. I love a captain's roll as they call it, or a box press. Both same thing. Those are probably my favorite kind though.
All right, now I'm trying to figure out. I still have multiple ways to kind of run on this, and we're running an hour. So if you need to leave, tell me. Like, hey, I gotta go. I got things to do. You've got a fantasy lineup to kind of keep track of and make sure you're winning today. I assume because you said you were setting your lineup this morning, and I assume that's a fantasy football situation.
I still got about 30 minutes, man. I'm good.
Okay. So I think I read correctly. You came from bartending, is it right? Like you were doing some bartending. What is the best whiskey cocktail that you can think of that is not super hyped already? Right? Like, is there a hidden gem of whiskey cocktails that everybody's sleeping on?
I don't know if you would say it's a hidden one, but my absolute favorite that I make at home all the time is a Ward 8. I love a Ward 8, and it's really simple. It's just bourbon, orange juice, lemon juice with a little bit of grenadine. But I like my acidic with my bourbon. I like the fruit and stuff like that. To me, I think that should be on more cocktail menus because you really don't see it out. It's just your typical old-fashioned Manhattan, things like that. And I'm a secret lover of Aperol spritzes. Like, people make fun of me all the time because I go out and I'll order those at the bars or restaurants. But that's another good hidden gem cocktail, I feel like. But when it comes to a good bourbon or rye cocktail, man, you can't beat a good Ward 8, in my opinion. And Barn 8, it's a restaurant here. Randy runs their cocktail and beverage program. They have some of the most unique cocktails out there. I can't think of off top hand some of them, but I'm telling you what, if you live in Louisville, Kentucky, and you have not been out there, you need to go out there and check out their cocktails, because talk about unique and like one-of-a-kind cocktails that she curates out there.
Did you say, and you said Barn 8?
Barn 8.
Barn
it's like
8.
Hermitage Farms is what it sits on, and it's fantastic.
Okay, so I have a work trip. I'm going to be in Louisville in February. What's the bar that I take the people that I'm going to be meeting with and be like, all right, now this is the thing that is not the tourist bar, not the 4th Street Live, like a genuine good place to have a beverage while not being an asshole.
Like I say, either Barn 8, but like I said, I always tell everyone, if you're coming to town, you want a good restaurant, Bourbon Bistro. Jason Bronner is like the OG of the whiskey world, right? He was doing barrel picks, all this stuff before it was ever even a thing, before it was ever cool to be involved in bourbon. And they have a one-page menu. I'm very indecisive as it is, So being able to have a one-page menu and know that everything they do on this menu, they do very well. They do these Parmesan grits with deep fried oysters, like pickled red peppers. They have a pork chop, their steak frits, just everything on there, and it really is. And what I love about it is, I hope I'm not bringing like more popular or making it more noticeable, because what I love about it is like a little bit of a hidden gem in Louisville. And there's people from the industry that always stop up there. You're liable to go see Bernie Lovers up there, Stephen Fonte. I mean, you just never know who's going to be in there dining, eating, sitting around, and they have a great selection too.
You know, and I'll say this: I will go even knowing that Bernie might be there. If it's just me, but I was at an event at you were at the same event. We were both at the same event. I just realized this, right? So the Heaven Hill event that Jack had for Afrofusion.
Yeah.
My wife was there with me, and she now has an infatuation with Bernie Lovers. Absolutely infatuated with him. So I won't go if she's with me because I'm trying to keep this marriage safe.
Hell of a guy, man. He can play a guitar too.
So I was at Whiskey Weekend Batch 4, and he was one of the guests, and he got up there and he played for a while, and just super fun event, fun guy. And my wife, you know, he was like, "Oh, you know, I've got a Reno tattoo," and he pulls up his sleeve, and I'm like, "All right, well, this is it. I'll just go home now. Thanks, man. This is the best." But we were at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. He was there as well, and I kind of sent my wife a message like, "Hey, he's here." She was sitting in the VIP area, just like reading a book because she doesn't really care about whiskey. Anyways, so Bourbon Bistro, it's on the list. You don't have to worry about it kind of getting out because I only have like 9 people that are going to watch this, so it's not. You're not going to have any too big of concerns. Most of the people that are in chat are it.
Like I said, I take all my barrel groups there when they come in town. I'm like, hey, y'all want to grab a bite to eat tonight? It's like, we got to go to Bourbon Bistro.
All right, so you collect vinyl, is that right?
I do. I have a vinyl record player down in my office. So when you come in and select the barrel, I got a whole selection of records we can put on as we taste through barrels. I love, there's something just about the sound of it.
What's the genre for you? Like, what is the key genre of vinyl, or do you have like kind of a wide collection of stuff?
I have a wide collection of stuff because what really got me into it, sadly, is when I had some family members pass away, right? And I got like their whole collection.
Yep.
I had 2 of my uncles pass away, and I got both of their stereo systems. So we're talking like they kept it in print condition. I got like 4 big old subwoofer speakers connected to it, and I had all these records. I mean, it took me weeks to go through these records and like sort them out, but I tell you what, man, I love good classical, or my grandma had what it's called the swinging years, and that is like one of my favorite records to put on the vinyl. Or I have another one called Sounds or Music from Marlboro Country, and it's like the theme music to the Magnificent Seven, like a bunch of like Western movies. That is just another good one to throw on there too.
I love that. You touched on a thing for me. My brother and I have a regular conversation. There is nothing in my parents' possession that I'll ever fight him over, except for my dad's record collection. And I told him, I was like, if you try to take the records, I will burn your house down. Like, just know that. Like, I won't, not with him in it. Like, I'm not trying to kill it. Just like, there's a message here. So, I get that. I enjoy records as well. There's something about the analog nature of it. There's something about the warmth of the sound. It's just pretentious as hell, and I acknowledge it, but I'm care.
Okay with it.
I don't care, you know. So what? It's still fantastic. And when people come over and they're like, "Oh, we had some guests over last night," and they were like, "Hey, can I look at the record collection?" Yeah, look at it. Like, you want to play something, let's play it. That's what it's here for. The same as the whiskey. You want to drink it, let's drink it.
I'm so proud to show it off when people come to the distillery. I'm like, hey, like go over there, pick a record out, and we'll taste through some barrels. Like, it's a different experience.
So you've got it there. Is the Marlboro Country the go-to record, or like if somebody says, just put something on, like what's the first thing you kind of throw on the platter and let it spin?
I would say probably either, music from Marlboro Country, because I mean it's just a classic. It's so good. Or I'll put on my swing music, man, on there. And that usually, it's funny. That usually takes people back. So because a lot of people are like, oh my god, I remember listening to this as a child with my grandparents. So I always try to find something other people can relate to too, and that's usually always the oldies. Michael Jackson's another good one to throw on. You know, if
Yep.
you haven't listened to "Beat It" on vinyl yet, you know, and that bum kicks in, man, it's a different feeling.
Yep, and you're getting you mostly you're getting the people who are going to connect with that, you know. But we're coming up on like an age where people are kind of aging out of understanding Michael Jackson, and they're looking for things that are slightly later, music wise. But luckily, there's a resurgence in vinyl, and you can get those things too. You can get just about anything on vinyl. If you're sitting at home, what do you pair? Like you're sitting at home, you want to sit down, you want to listen to a song.
Kings of Leon, man. That's usually
Oh.
one of my first records I throw on here, dude. I fell in love with them, you know, through their old stuff, and I saw them at Bourbon Beyond this past weekend, front row. But yeah, that's usually one of the good ones I throw on, especially if I'm at home cooking or, you know, trying to catch up on some emails and things like that. Just Kings of Leon every day.
You know, and I'll say this just as an older person, because you're significantly younger than me. I felt triggered by Bourbon and Beyond's lineup for Sunday because that was absolutely my era of people. And they put it on Sunday when they're like, we know the old folks will be well rested up. They can show up on a Sunday afternoon, listen to some fantastic music and still be okay. Like, this is what it felt like to me. But I also, I was doing Bourbon Festival, and I kind of had that conundrum. I'm like, I'd like to do both, but I'm too old to do both of them anymore. They have a fantastic lineup.
Doobie Brothers killed it. Like, even after listening to them, I had to go on and look for a vinyl from Doobie Brothers because they sang a lot of songs like I had no idea they sang that. But by far the best. I mean, Chris Stapleton was good, but Doobie Brothers, I mean, if you weren't there, it's hard to describe. I mean, they rocked out on Sunday.
You know, and maybe that's what is attractive about vinyl to me is that there's not a thing that can replace live music. It doesn't exist. You know, I had an opportunity to see John Prine right before he died in a live setting, right? But I also have the exact same album that he was kind of touring from in vinyl, and it's close, right? Because you can almost hear the breath. There's not the digital cleanup that happens with a CD or an MP3 or anything like that, and you get that vibe. But man, live music, like the pandemic sort of sucked because it just took that part away.
Man, I know a lot of people were doing what they call couch tours, right? Because they were they were putting like live music on TV. You could sit there. That was about the closest you got to experiencing the real thing.
The only thing I can take from it is a couple. Well, there's a lot of things we can all take from this living at home for a couple of months to a year, but musicians need some type of a thing to happen to inspire, to kind of create this moment. And you're exactly right. There was a lot of really top quality music that was coming from people's couches, coming from people's living rooms. There's an Americana artist that I follow, and they just did live kitchen covers. And it was this man and his wife playing music I can't remember, Saturday or Sunday. And they would sit down and they would cover 2 or 3 songs, and then they turned it into a vinyl album. And I'm like, give me the vinyl album. I want an exact copy of this. And so it created some artistic direction, but I could have done without it as well.
Oh, absolutely. I forget what it is, but it's the one like where they come into that library and sing. Those artists. I forget the name of it.
You talking about Tiny Desk concerts?
Yes, Tiny Desk concerts, man. Like that was one of the best things ever. I love going back and watching those.
That's there's not many things that would make me want to work at NPR just because it's just too low key for me. But that's one. Like they have those Tiny Desk concerts, and you have amazing artists that come through and play in such a small, concise venue. Just fantastic. But you live in Louisville, you get to see a lot of either local or major acts on a regular basis. What's the one that, like, in the last, we've been able to see music again in the last year? What's the thing? What's the music event that you're like, all right, there it is, it's back?
Bourbon Beyond. I mean, like I said, Bourbon Beyond had been canceled. The first year it was amazing. Second year it got rained out. Then you had COVID, and then they didn't do the year after. And seeing everyone, I don't know if you saw like the aerial footage of Bourbon Beyond, but it was insane. Like there was just people there, live music going on. So for me, that's really, and I was like, all right, like it's back to normal. We're everyone's out and about supporting these concerts and everything.
Mhm.
And then to me, that was just absolutely fantastic to see the turnout there.
Yeah. The first, my wife and I kind of went back and forth on this, and I have, like I've said before, I have a couple children, and they're 11 and 8, and it's like, what's the first concert you take them to, and you hope it's not going to be something that's poppy. Like, I'll take them to whatever they want to go see, because live music is live music. It doesn't matter, but like, I want something to be kind of meaningful. And this artist, Drew Holcomb, who's is an Americana artist, they did a Valentine's Day show in 2021. So we're like just right out of the pandemic, and it's super limited attendance. It's at the Ryman in Nashville, which is like this, just beautiful place to see music. And it was their first show after being locked at home for over a year. And it was the best, like it was an intimate moment. It was, it was fantastic music, and it was a connection with people. There's something about that.
Oh, 100%. Just the experience, everything, it's just, it all involves too the people you're with, the time you're having, like everything plays a factor when you're out there listening to live music. I took my mom and two of her girlfriends to see ZZ Top at the Iroquois Amphitheater like 2 weeks before he passed away. The what's name passed away, and that was just a once in a lifetime for my mom, for her friends, and for me to sit there and experience music she loved growing up, and being able to take her to one of her favorite bands.
Yeah, I got the opportunity to go watch Eric Clapton in Nashville with my dad, who's a huge Eric Clapton fan, and it was the first tour where he started playing things like cocaine again, because
Yes.
he had a drug problem. He stopped playing them, and the first tour he starts playing them back. Dad's like, "Hey, you want to go to this?" I'm like, "Absolutely, I do." Like, I know what the audience, but yeah, we're gonna go watch it. And it was a great concert for me, but I could tell it was a better concert for him. And it's one of those things you can just kind of lock up forever.
I guarantee he had flashbacks, being a kid, or back in his high school days. Like, oh my gosh, I remember listening to this in the car.
I can tell you the exact moment that I know the nostalgia hit him, because we're sitting there. He's maybe 3 or 4 chords into cocaine, and I immediately smell exactly what you expect to smell in any concert venue while he's playing cocaine. And I look over, and my dad has his eyes closed, and he's just smelling the air. Like it's hitting a tone for him, and he's not that guy anymore. Like, all the hippies grew up and became business people, like they started wearing suits, and he did all the yuppie things. But for that, like 4.5 to 10 minutes, he was just connected. And I'm like, you've never admitted to it, but I know now. I know.
And same thing. It's funny you say that about him just smelling. It's the same thing. You can take that with whiskey. It's always stuff like, don't necessarily think of like what you're tasting, but like when you taste, like where does it take your mind? Or like when you're smelling it. We always say like Caleb will always reference like being back at the farm and things, like when he's smelling and tasting stuff. So that's just another way you can kind of interject those same two things.
Tasting is a weird thing, and it's the memory trip of it. And I've had the opportunity. I started collecting whiskey with this idea that I was going to have people over, and we're going to do a tasting at the house. And I've got all these bottles. And then I had kids, and I learned about like there's daily clean, and then there's like clean when people are coming over. And I'm like, God, that's a lot of work, So, and then the pandemic hit, and it gave me an opportunity to just like give some samples to friends. And then we all hopped on Zoom, and so we were able to do a tasting again. And that's the thing I always pushed them, is like, how does this trigger a memory for you? And I was in a work trip, and we were kind of, just kind of passing around some whiskey, and I hit a note that reminded me of like the late 80s. If you bought a new pair of tennis shoes, they always had leather, and they had a distinct leather smell to them. And it hit, and I loved that smell because we didn't get like new shoes on a regular basis when I was a kid. And so like when you did, it was like an event. It was like a whole vibe for you. And I told the guy who brought the whiskey, and he was just completely angry about it, because that wasn't a good smell for him.
Yeah.
And so I spent the rest of the night being like, listen, I'm trying to tell you, like, this unlocked like a core memory of nostalgia that is good for me. And that's okay. And that's what I think that's what makes whiskey interesting for most of us, and in coffee and cigars, is that they can hit those memory bones, and they just kind of resonate.
Every bottle I have open, I can tell you when I opened it, who I was
Mhm.
with. So like I said, it's just all about the experience, sharing it, enjoying a pour with somebody, whether it's having a cigar or a drink. It's just more than just, in my opinion, than just buying a bottle and drinking it. It's meant to be shared, enjoyed with people, and that's some of the best things. Like I love a good bottle kill. Like when you empty out that
Yep.
bottle and you're with a bunch of friends, and it's about the conversation and everything else.
What do you do with your bottles whenever you're done with them? Because this is the conundrum that I regularly have. Is like it's a vessel that has memories with it, but I don't have the ability to store all of the empties and the full bottles.
I always tell people, if I can find a way just to say, hey, like if I can find a way to start a company in business to taking all these whiskey bottles, I mean, I can make a fortune just on my friends alone, probably, and people I know. Like, send me all your empty bottles, whether it's
Yeah.
recycling or doing something with them. But a majority of them, it's sad to say, I will keep some. I was like that college dude that had all his empty
Yep.
bottles, and finally I was like, you know what, I gotta start throwing some of this stuff away, or it's just I'm gonna be a pat rack. I'm gonna be that guy that has hundreds and hundreds of empty bottles around this place. So sadly, man, just to recycle them. Take them to recycling centers, see what they can do with them. Or I know people. A lot of teachers now, like art teachers, we have stopped by and say, hey, any empty bottles? I love doing art projects and stuff with my students. So I always try to put a feel out, see if anybody needs some empty bottles, whether it's to make candles, lamps. People are doing all types of wild stuff now with empty bottles.
Yeah, I have a coworker that does lamps, and so he'll be like, "Hey, if you got empty bottles, give me a bottle, and I'll give you a lamp back." I'm like, "Man, I don't need 100 lamps in my house. Like, I have a couple that are meaningful, but I don't need like 100 of these things." He's doing a fantastic job. And so I've started just collecting the corks like a wine snob. Like, I got all the corks. Most of them have something emblazoned on the top or whatever. If you get like a castle and key, you can kill somebody with the top of that bottle.
My God, can you? And the Frank August, I don't know if you've had their bottle.
I've seen it. I haven't held one in my hand, but I've seen it, and it looks
great
like a
stuff,
monster.
man. But their cork is the real deal too.
It's like a borderline, like it's a murder weapon that should be in Clue. Like if you were playing Clue, like in the conservatory with the Frank August bottle top. All right, I don't know that I've got any more questions. I think that I've kind of burned through everything I've got. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about?
Just a little bit about this upcoming weekend. Today is September 25th. This coming weekend we have Bourbon on the Banks here in Frankfort, Kentucky. We did me, Alan Bishop, Hunter Coffee with Three Boy Farms, Kelly Tennille. We went out to Wilderness Trail and we did a barrel pick with Macaulay, which if you haven't met Macaulay, one of the best dudes and smartest dudes in the industry. He's out there with Pat Heiss and all them. We picked 2 barrels and he let us do a blend. It's the first time they've only done like a 4-grain whiskey. We picked a wheated bourbon barrel and blended it with a high rye bourbon, which will be sold exclusively there at the festival. And then we took 132 pounds of a Papua New Guinea bean and put it in a Wilderness Trail barrel that they're going to start selling in their gift shop too as well. So we got a specialty coffee rolling out for Wilderness Trail. Plus we're doing a specialty coffee for Bourbon on the Banks and one of the barrels that we picked to there for the festival. So if you're around this way and want to come down and see something really cool, I'll be down there with Stave and Bean. Me and my business partner Corey will be handing out samples of coffee, roasting some stuff, making espressos, lattes. So make sure if you haven't purchased a ticket, you should definitely swing in there and check it out.
And I completely saw the Alan Bishop thing and just it slipped my brain because Alan was either the first or the second interview that I ever did on this podcast, and that was one of the most fun conversations I've ever had. And I think after it was over, like I killed the feed, and then we talked for like another 30 or 45 minutes. He's just a super, super interesting character. And then Macaulay, is that Bourbon Swami on like Instagram or whatever?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So he, if he watches this, like I got an email to you, I'm trying to get a hold of you, but he and Haley did a blend for Kentucky Bourbon Festival last weekend. I don't know if you had that or not.
I got it in my kitchen counter right now, man. It's fantastic stuff. Him and Haley, like they do a great job.
It's so good. Like I got the 8-year bottled in bond whenever it came out. I had a friend that went to the distillery, picked a bottle up and shipped it down to me. And I was like, okay, look, they can't. They're like, this is just phenomenal. It's it's a phenomenal bottled and bond product. 8 years, it's awesome. And then at the festival, I'm like, I'm gonna buy this because I know it's gonna be good.
Fantastic. And shout out to Amzie Winning, who put together that fantastic team to go to Wilderness Trail and kind of helps put on Bourbon on the Banks. Just another great guy that if you haven't met him or follow him, definitely check him out. He used to be, what do they call those? Sort of like Fossil and Rocks, man. He's just he's a funny dude.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and they've got the what is it, the mud fossils that they're after on a regular basis.
Yeah, they love their mud fossils.
Yeah, and I'll plug this one last thing. Bourbon Turntable, fantastic podcast that exists. The episode that you did with them is a great episode as well. I usually listen to a lot of things, but I was already subscribed to them before I ever even was going to talk to you. And they've got a lot of stuff, and they talk about Amzie on a regular basis. Anything from that group, it's just fantastic. Just fantastic.
Kevin, another nice dude, giving the shirt off his back. Shout out to Benjamin. He followed his dream, and now he's out there distilling out at Kentucky Artisan. So, just shows you don't ever give up. If you want to do something, man, don't be afraid to make that jump.
And that's I was talking with Aaron from Smoke Wagon, and that was one of the things that he said. He was like, man, you want to do a thing, go do a thing. And I don't remember exactly what we were talking about. He was like, it's never too late to try a new experience or event or career or whatever. Yeah.
And the industry just, it's like I said, it's even though we are all competitors, I always tell people, everyone's like, oh, you get along with other people from distilleries. I always tell people, I was like, we all get along fine. So it's the marketing teams that don't like each other, right? They're like, don't tell people this, don't tell people that. But and I say that jokingly, but
well, I mean, they do, but they also, it feels like a friendly competitive environment, like where you're not gonna just spit at each other whenever you're out in public. You're still gonna have drinks at the bar, but you're also trying to beat that person. And that's exactly what it feels like. I've been able to be at events for Heaven Hill or for Buffalo Trace or for smaller distilleries as well. And it's the same vibe everywhere. And it doesn't fit any other corporate culture in America. It's unique.
And a great example is Heaven Hill, the 97 fire they had there, right? I mean, that could have pretty much almost put them out of business. And you had distilleries giving them barrels, making whiskey for them until they kind of got back on their feet. Where, like you said, in most corporate settings, they're like, good, another one Nick on. Like,
one less competitor.
Exactly.
One, we could eliminate. And, Heaven Hill is not the biggest competitor in the market. It's not a Diageo or whatever else, but it's still a big chunk of money. Like, it's a big chunk of money that everyone could compete for. And, it feels like they would rather win by winning than win by default.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, absolutely, thank you for joining me. The anything that goes on with Peerless, anything that goes on with Stave and Bean, I'm always following, and everyone else who watches, all 10 of you that watch this or listen to this, absolutely should be doing the exact same thing. I'll give you a chance to kind of run over the places to buy merchandise or product.
Like I said, you can check us out. If you want to check out our coffee, it's www.staveandbean.com. We free shipping with any purchase. We also have a new coffee brittle on our website from Randy's Candy. She's the cocktail curator and beverage director out there at Barn 8. She makes a coffee brittle for us. If you're ever in downtown Louisville, Kentucky, stop by, Kentucky Peerless. We have tons of distillery picks that we do down there. We got our double oak small batch. We have our rum finish down there, as well as plenty of other stuff to check out in the gift shop too. Or just stop by and ask for me. I love to come out and say hi.
Yep. So, and I'm absolutely, if I'm not there before February, you can expect that I'm going to show up and you're going to be like, hey, you look sort of familiar, but I think maybe I talked to you 6 months ago. Going to show up for sure. Because when Peerless released their first launch, I live in Western Kentucky, and I was like, I may make the drive up there. I'm thinking about doing it. It's like a 3.5 hour drive from where I live to where Peerless is.
Come on up and we'll have a drink.
And I didn't, because I knew what time I would have to get up, and I'm glad I did and glad I didn't. I wish I had, because I would have loved to have had it, but I wouldn't have made it in time. They sold through everything so fast, and it's impressive what's going on at that distillery. Kudos to you guys and what you're doing. Exactly the same thing happened with Stave and Bean on your first run of coffee. It's all super fantastic.
Thank you. Like I said, I never in a million years thought I'd say I'm a business owner. So it was definitely, it's been a crazy journey. And like I said, hats off to, thank goodness for my business partner, Corey, that really saw the kind of like a bigger picture and really helped amp it up. Like I said, he's more of the brains. I let him take care of all the business stuff. I like doing the grunt work, rolling, filling barrels, and doing all that stuff. So, I wouldn't be able to do it without him. He definitely plays a key role into the company.
I think maybe you're not taking enough credit because you're saying he's all the brains, but I think you had the initial idea, right? Like you had the idea.
Yeah.
So you got to take some of that credit. He may be giving you some of the business acumen to get it into production, but you get to take some of that credit, man. Like own it where you deserve it.
Yeah, thank you.
So, all right. Well, so thank you for joining me, John. I'm going to boot you out. We're going to hit the outro here. I super appreciate you giving me, an hour and 20 minutes of your time on a Sunday. You got a fantasy team lineup that's about to destroy whoever your competitors are. Obviously, I know that's going to happen.
I'm in 3 different leagues. I said just 1 this year, and 3 leagues later, here I am.
That's the way it works. I stopped. This is my first year not doing a fantasy league because I'm out of time at this point. Like I started this hobby of like doing a podcast, and I have 2 kids that go do things, and it's like either that or like be a neglectful father. And so if I'm going to do the neglectful father thing, it's going to be because of a whiskey podcast, not because of fantasy football.
That's because of fantasy football. I like it.
Right. Thank you so much.
Hey, cheers, John. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for tuning in for this offering from the Embellish Podcast. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform that you have to be consuming this on. Leave a comment if possible. Hit me up on social media at Twitter or Instagram using Embellish Pod, and give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can also be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, and contact details. I'll be back again next week with another new offering for you. So until then, cheers, and thanks for hanging out.